This week, we're talking about the power of tone of voice.
You are listening to Love Your Job Before You Leave It, the podcast for ambitious, high-achieving women who are ready to stop feeling stressed about work and kiss burnout goodbye forever. Whether you're starting a business or staying in your day job, this show will give you the coaching and guidance you need to start loving your work today. Here's your host, career coach Corey Lynn.
Hey, y'all. Happy Wednesday. How are you? I'm doing pretty well. I took a beautiful long walk around my neighborhood today, and it was rainy, but pretty temperate out, and I really enjoyed it, even though it was raining. And things are starting to bloom. Springtime is coming, and I'm pretty excited for it. And I hope you had a lovely day as well. This week, we're talking about a tool that I actually learned approximately 1 million years ago, back when I was in therapy with one of my very first therapists, Christiane Storm, who practices in Seattle, or at least did way back in the day when I went to therapy with her. So I went to therapy with Christiane for several years and learned all kinds of stuff, and she was wonderful. But one of the things that's really stuck with me is basically a teaching about how to notice your internal tone of voice and how shifting your internal tone of voice can be really powerful. So as an example, I think one of the thought patterns that I was working on back then with her would be like a why did I do that kind of like I would do something and then my brain would be like, why did you do that? In this really kind of like aggressive, rude, judgmental tone of voice. And something she would say was basically just like, what if you just change the tone that you're asking? And so to put it in sort of like more of the terms we usually use in the coaching space, it's like shifting from judgment to curiosity, but the question can actually stay the same, right? So why did you do that can become, why did you do that? Or even like, why did you do that? Or tell me more about that. And I just really love this approach, and it really helped me with a lot of stuff. And really it helped me shift from judgment into curious compassion, but it also helped me kind of notice tone of voice. And it's even something you can use with other people, where when you're talking to them, you can also notice the tone of voice that would be sort of like your default, and then ask yourself, like, is that the tone of voice I would like to use? Why or why not? So this is like a pretty simple tool, but I think it's so powerful and will be really impactful for you in how you talk to yourself and in how you get information from yourself. Because one thing I want you to notice is like with the thought pattern of like, why did I do that? When we ask it in a judgmental tone of voice, we are not actually asking for like a real answer to the question. And the implied answer is always an insult to ourselves. So like, when we say it in the judgmental tone of voice, like, why would I do that? Sort of like it implies a certain kind of answer, like I shouldn't do that. There's something wrong with me if I do that. Doing that is bad or unappealing or something I should know better than, blah, blah, blah. And what happens is that makes us feel shitty. And what happens when we feel shitty is we tend to want to like numb or avoid. We don't approach what we're doing with curiosity. We assume something's wrong with the situation. We assume something's wrong with us. And we also often get stuck in that same pattern, right? An example that I use all the time is like, if we drink too much and we wake up and we have a hangover, feel kind of shitty, we'll go like, oh, why did I drink that much? I'm never drinking again. And then all day long, if we're like judging ourselves for having drank, we're like, oh, what's wrong with me? I drank so much. It's like we're spending the whole day with this person who's kind of bullying us. And then by the time it's 5 p.m., we're like, oh, I want to drink again because we want to get away from that voice in our head that's like being judgmental, right? So in that way, judgment will actually keep us in the loop and the pattern of doing the very thing we judged ourselves for. Whereas when you change the tone of voice, you go from like, why did I do that? To like, why? Why did I do that? You tap into curiosity and then you can actually wonder, and then you can actually think through like, maybe there's a reason I did that. If there were a reason I did that, what might the reason be? And then you can explore, and what's going to happen there is you're probably going to find out why you did the thing because you're truly asking why versus using the question why as a stick to beat yourself with. So one of the things I teach my client is the idea that like we do things for good reasons, even things that don't make sense, or even things that take us further away from our goals, even things that like fuck our lives up, even things that disrupt our success or sabotage us. If we're doing those things, I like to believe that there's a part of us that's trying to help us and it's just confused about how to do that, right? And when you ask yourself in a truly curious tone of voice, why did I do that? Like, what caused that? How did this come to happen? Why did I think that was a good idea? Or if I didn't think that was a good idea, why did I do it anyways? Right? So if we come in with this like assumption that we're sane and that the things we're doing make some kind of sense, and we get really curious and we use softer, comforting, kinder tone of voice, then we can begin to unpack that. We can begin to discover like, oh, I didn't, call that job back because I was afraid maybe I couldn't actually do the job and I didn't want to be embarrassed later. So instead of like taking the job and having the risk and being embarrassed later, I just didn't call them back. Right. And so then it's being like, why didn't I do that? Like, why did I do that? Why didn't I call them back? We can be like, oh, it makes perfect sense why I didn't call them back, but maybe that's like not what I want to do again in the future. And so part of me was really scared. And so I'm maybe going to need some comfort or some care to feel safe enough to call them back. Here's what's really interesting about this. Only one of these approaches is solution focused. The interesting thing is so many people think that like being mean to themselves is effective, but being mean to yourself is not solution focused. Being mean to yourself is punishment focused. Why did I do that? What's wrong with me? I'll never get better. I'll never learn. Like, and then like fill in the blank with any insult. You like tell yourself like, what a dumbass or like blah, blah, blah. Right? Versus, why did I do that? There's probably a reason I did that. And even if it's not what I want to do again, if I can come to understand why I actually did that, then maybe I could do it differently next time. That's solution focused. It's understanding focused versus the other one is like just focused on punishment, just focused on making you feel bad. And it's not going to help you do differently, right? Here's another example. So that's like with the question, why did I do that? Another example is like, the work I'm doing is not good enough, right? Like, let's say I'm working on a project and I can have the thought, this is not good enough. Ugh, right? Cringe. Ugh. Or I can have the thought like, this isn't good enough. Do you see how the tone of voice makes those really different? Like one is like, this isn't good enough, which means I'm not good enough and it should be good already. And something's wrong if it's not good enough and I'm bad and it's bad and we're all bad. I may as well give up, like put the project away, get a glass of wine, go sit on the couch and binge a bunch of Netflix, right? Whereas the second one in the different tone of voice is like, oh, this isn't good enough. But in that tone, there's like not a problem there. It's just like a noticing. It's just like, this is some neutral information. It's like, this isn't good enough, but like, maybe I could make it good enough. And what would make it good enough? And like, why isn't it working? Right? And that's another good example. Like, why isn't it working? Which is like, I feel frustrated. It should be working. I'm upset versus like, why isn't it working? Is like curious of like, maybe it could be working, but it's not right now. And that's okay. But like, maybe we could figure out why it is if we were able to bring like the right mindset and the right energy and the right attention to it. So I think that you'll find that this can be effective for all kinds of things. So I want you to like pay attention, not just to like what you say to yourself inside the head, like what the actual words are, what the language choices you make are, but what's the tone of voice? And if you had to describe that tone of voice, how would you describe it? Is it mean? Is it judgmental? Is there like someone in your life that it reminds you of? Or like, are you the rare among us? Is your internal voice kind? Is it curious? Is it compassionate? And probably like some of the times it's some of each, but for a lot of people, for me before coaching and even sometimes still, and for a lot of my clients, a lot of our internal voice is judgmental. It's criticizing, it's shaming, it's about keeping us in line. And what I'm inviting you into is an internal tone of voice that's about connection. It's about curiosity. It's about compassion. And again, it's solution focused versus punishment focused. It's solution focused versus problem focused. It's open. It's seeking. It's like looking for what could be versus like deciding what already is and crossing its arms. Like that's kind of how I feel about like the judgy tone of voices. It's like got its arms crossed and it's like, why bother? But like even why bother, right? If we change the tone of voice on that, why bother? well, I'm going to bother because I'd like to develop this skill, or like, I'm going to bother because this really matters to me, or like, I'm going to bother because I want to build a business. And even if I, do this wrong 15 times or 15,000 times, it's worth it to me. That's like why I'm going to bother. I think you'll be amazed if all you do is change the tone of voice that you use to talk to yourself. I think that will shake so much loose for you in, shifting from a mindset that feels like shit and isn't helping to shifting into a mindset that like feels yummy and is helping you create a satisfying as fuck, delicious, yummy life and career. And listen, I realize that changing your internal voice can be a hard thing to do, changing the tone and changing the language. And you don't have to do that alone. I am here to do that work with you. That's the exact kind of work I do with my clients. I do it with my clients one-on-one. I do it with my clients in group. And, you can slide on over to my website, corylyn.com, and sign up for a consult call. And we can talk about what that could look like for you and what could change in your life when you do change your tone of voice internally in this way. And we can talk about whether you'd be a good fit for SAF, my small group program, or for one-on-one coaching, because we're going to learn to do that skill in both. Oh, and here's the other thing, bonus teaching. Changing your tone of voice isn't just powerful for yourself, it's also powerful for others. A lot of us talk to others more kindly than we talk to ourselves. But what I've also found is that the people we live with, like our significant others, and sometimes our children, sometimes our parents or siblings, sometimes we use a more similar tone of voice when we talk to them as what we use when we talk to ourselves. It's like the closer into our circle they are, the more the way we talk to them overlaps with the way we talk to ourselves. Like in my life, I've seen this, that like the people I'm always the hardest on are always my significant others, right? So when you think about having connected relationships with others, looking at your tone of voice there can also be really interesting. Like something that could be a fight with your significant other could actually turn into a really beautiful and connection building conversation if you can just switch your tone of voice from like, why did you do that, to like, hey, help me understand why you did that. Like, what's going on? Or like, why bother, to like, hey, I'm like struggling with this and I want to understand, like, why would I bother to do this? Or why are we bothering to do this in our relationship? Like, let's talk about it. It's a really, really simple tool. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but you can do it and I can help you do it. And it's going to change all kinds of stuff and really delight you. So give it a try and then come over to Instagram and let me know how it's going. All right. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Love Your Job Before You Leave It. We'll have another episode for you next week. And in the meantime, if you're feeling super fired up, head on over to corylyn.com for more guidance and resources.